The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one. Good morning. So today I'm going to talk about the simile of the mountains, which is found in the Samyutta Nikaya. Okay? And I'm hoping a lot of you got a chance to read it, but if not, I think you can follow me just fine here, I hope. So, as I think you probably all know, the Buddha often taught using similes. He used similes to make a point of the Dharma, okay? You know, there was no TV or internet in those days, so he had to draw on nature. And of course, nature and just things that are happening in life are just really visual and helpful examples of how things happen and play out. Okay, so to the simile of the mountains. So the Buddha is in, I think it's called Savatthi, and it's the middle of the day, and he comes upon King Pasenadi. He's the king of Kosala, and in fact the king approaches the Buddha. Well, it turns out that the Buddha and the king they know each other well. The king is a follower of the Buddha, and you know, over the years they've talked, and the Buddha has given him teachings. And there's one really interesting teaching I thought that the king was given. So he had many wives. That's what they did in those days. And one of his wives had a baby, and it was a baby girl. And the king was kind of disappointed. Okay? Well, the Buddha heard about this, and he went to the king and he said, you know, some women are smarter than men. Okay? And he also said, maybe someday that woman will have a child who will become the future king. So that really helped the king. Okay. But at this instance, they meet in the middle of the day, and the Buddha asks the king, he says, where are you coming from, great king, in the middle of the day? And the king replies, just now I have been engaged in a meeting with members of the warrior administrative class who are intoxicated with the intoxication of power, who are obsessed by greed for sensual pleasures, who have attained staple control in their control, probably by force. They got this control. And who rule having conquered a great sphere of territory. So he's probably seeing a mirror of himself partly there, because I'm sure he struggled with some of the same difficulties. So the Buddha hears this from the king, and that he's, you know, glad. The king is glad to be away from the meeting with these people. And the Buddha gives him this simile of the mountain. Okay? He tells the story of a man arriving at court from the east, who's just come from the east, who's trustworthy and reliable. And this person coming from the east relays to the king that there's a great mountain coming from the east, high as the clouds, crushing all living beings. Okay? Then a second person coming from the west explains that the same thing is happening in the western direction. The mountain is coming this way. Next, a third person who's again, you know, reliable and trustworthy, comes from the north and tells the same scenario. So from the north, the great mountain is coming upon the kingdom. Finally, a fourth man from the south confirms that a great mountain high as the clouds is coming, crushing all living beings as it moves. So, The scenario here is that there's a mountain coming from all directions, and it's just encroaching upon you. Then the Buddha poses this question to the king. If, great king, such a great peril should arise, such as the destruction of human life, the human state of being so difficult to obtain, what should be done? And the king comes up with a very good answer. If, venerable sir, such a great peril should arise, such a terrible destruction of human life, the human state being so difficult to obtain, what else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds? That's a pretty darn good answer, And of course, this is just, a story that the Buddha's relaying to him, very much a simile of the encroaching mountain. But the king gives a pretty darn good reply. So then the Buddha says, I inform you, great king, I announce to you, great king, aging and death are rolling in on you. When aging and death are rolling in on you, great king, what should be done? The king replies, as aging and death are rolling in on me, venerable sir, what else should be done but to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds? So again, a really good answer. And the king kind of then harkens back to the meeting he was just came from. And he realizes that no matter what power and might and wealth those military rulers might have, these are no match when aging and death are rolling in. So the mountains are mountains of aging and death. Far better to live by the Dhamma, to live righteously and to do wholesome and meritorious deeds. So that's the simile of the mountain and the exchange between the Buddha and the king. I don't see this as a morbid sutta. I think there's a real benefit in contemplating, especially before it's kind of really in our face in life. It's really worth contemplating impermanence. Okay? As we all know, the one certainty in life is that being born, we eventually age, quite probably get sick, and die. If we are lucky, we live into old age, maybe with illness, but we're still living into old age, or maybe you don't have so much illness, okay? But you can't avoid death. There's really something about confronting the fact that we are subject to aging, disease, and death. And that aging, illness, and death are inescapable. In many ways, this moment right now, that's the present moment, is all we really have. Okay? Can't go backwards, can't leap forwards. You're just where you are, always right there. To use our time and our life to practice the Dharma is a much better option than relying on things that don't last. Okay? So at the very end of this sutta, the Buddha says, therefore a person of wisdom here, out of regard for his own good, steadfast, should settle faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. When one conducts oneself by the Dhamma with body, speech, and mind, they praise one here in the present life, and after death, one rejoices. So I think, as we all know, there is an immediacy about training. In a real sense, for all of us, doesn't matter what age we are, doesn't matter what our life experience is. In a real sense, the mountains of aging and death are closing in on us from all sides. It's just a reality. And what else should we do but live by the Dharma? Live upright with the precepts in mind and do wholesome and meritorious deeds that benefit ourselves and others. So what I'd like to do now is read from the numerical sayings a contemplation, which I think is very much in line with this simile of the mountains. And it's in a couple of books. Okay, it's in the numerical discourses of the Buddha, and it's also in that anthology of the numerical discourses of the Buddha, I think. It's definitely in the big volume that is big. Okay. And actually, it's in the anthology of the Buddha's words by Bhikkhu Bodhi. It's in this big book, and it's in that anthology. It's in those two places. So in the anthology, the Bhikkhu Bodhi refers to it as the 5 contemplations for everyone. In the numerical sayings, it's referred to as themes. Interesting. Okay, so let me read here. Bhikkhus, there are 5 themes that should often be reflected upon by a woman or a man, by a householder or one gone forth. What 5? Number 1, a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth should often reflect thus: I am subject to old age. I am not exempt from old age. 2, a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth should often reflect thus: I am subject to illness. I cannot exempt myself from illness. 3, a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth should often reflect thus: I am subject to death. I am not exempt from death. 4, a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth should often reflect thus: I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. 5, a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth should often reflect thus: I am the owner of my karma, the heir of my karma. I have karma as my origin. It's actually written as kamma, K-A-M-M-A, as my relative, kamma as my resort. I will be the heir of whatever karma, not karma, but I'm going to say karma here because I have a hard time saying that. Whatever karma, good or bad, that I do. For the sake of what benefits should a man or a woman, a householder or one gone forth, often reflect thus: I am subject to old age. I am not exempt from old age. In their youth, beings are intoxicated with their youth. And when they are intoxicated with their youth, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one reflects upon this theme, the intoxication with youth is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am subject to old age. I am not exempt from old age. And for the sake of what benefit should a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, often reflect thus: I am subject to illness. I am not exempt from illness. In a state of health, beings are intoxicated with their health. And when they are intoxicated with their health, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one often reflects upon this theme, the intoxication with health is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am subject to illness. I am not exempt from illness. And for the sake of what benefit should a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, often reflect thus: I am subject to death. I am not exempt from death. During their lives, beings are intoxicated with life. And when they are intoxicated with life, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one often reflects upon this theme, the intoxication with life is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am subject to death. I am not exempt from death. And for the sake of what benefit should a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, often reflect thus: I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. Beings have desire and lust in regard to those people and things that are near and agreeable. And excited by this lust, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one often reflects upon this theme, the desire and lust in regard to everyone and everything dear and agreeable is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. And for the sake of what benefit should a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, often reflect thus: I am the owner of my karma, the heir of my karma. I have karma as my origin, karma as my relative, karma as my resort. I will be the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that I do. People engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one reflects upon this theme, such misconduct is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that a woman or man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am the owner of my karma, the heir of my karma. I have karma as my origin, karma as my relative, karma as my resort. I will be the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that I do. So bear with me, there's a little bit more here. This noble disciple reflects thus: I am not the only one who is subject to old age, not exempt from old age. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to old age. None are exempt from old age. As he often reflects on this theme, the path is generated. He pursues this path, develops it, and cultivates it. As he does so, the fetters are entirely abandoned and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. This noble disciple reflects thus: I am not the only one who is subject to illness, not exempt from illness. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to illness. None are exempt from illness. As he often reflects on this theme, the path is generated. He pursues this path, develops it, and cultivates it. As he does so, the fetters are entirely abandoned and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. This noble disciple reflects thus: I am not the only one who is subject to death, not exempt from death. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to death. None are exempt from death. As he often reflects on this theme, the path is generated. He pursues this path, develops it, and cultivates it. As he does so, the fetters are entirely abandoned and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. This noble disciple reflects thus: I am not the one who must be I am not the only one who must be parted and separated from everyone and everything near and dear. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, must be parted and separated from everyone and everything near and dear. Actually, he says dear and agreeable. As he often reflects on this theme, the path is generated. He pursues this path, develops it, and cultivates it. As he does so, the fetters are entirely abandoned and the underlying tendencies are uprooted. This noble disciple reflects thus: I am not the only one who is the owner of one's karma, the heir of one's karma, who has karma as one's origin, karma as one's relative, karma as one's resort. Who will be the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that one does? All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are owners of their karma, heirs of their karma. All have karma as their origin, karma as their relative, karma as their resort. All will be heirs of whatever karma, good or bad, they do. As he often reflects on this theme, the path is generated. He pursues this path, develops it, and cultivates it. As he does so, the fetters are entirely abandoned and underlying tendencies are uprooted. So I hope that was a lot of reading, and I hope it was somewhat clear. Obviously, there was a lot of repetition, but I think it serves a good purpose there, because all of those things we kind of know, we also forget. Okay. And again, I do not see these contemplations as morbid contemplations, but rather it's the way it is. And there's something about facing the way it is. So I looked up our retreat roster. Okay, so and you good people who are here for this retreat, you range from the 20s to the 80s in age. We have someone in their 20s, we have someone in their 30s, we have someone in their 40s, we have someone in their 50s, we have someone in their 60s, we have someone in their 70s, and we have someone in their 80s. In fact, we have numerous someones in some of those places. Okay? And that's a really nice mix of ages. The majority of you, or maybe I can say us here, because I think it's the monks too, are in their 60s and 70s. And a fact I really don't need to tell you all about. Okay? In some Buddhist traditions, it's suggested that one contemplate these 5 themes, or these 5 contemplations for everyone once a day. Okay, I think the Theravadins do that. Ajahn Chah, the great Thai forest master, used to say that one should contemplate them numerous times every day. Okay? Let it suffice to say that these facts of impermanence and personal responsibility and ownership of our actions of body, speech, and mind are good things to think about with some regularity. Okay? They really make us face up to how we're doing with these things. And again, it's far better to do this wherever we are right now than to wait until the mountains are bearing in on us. Wait until aging and death are really bearing in on us. We're kind of I think we're going to die as we live. Although I think there's infinite compassion, and some people, approaching death have a real turnaround, but you can't be certain. Far better to work on these things now. Master Yu used to tell us when we were mostly young in the monastery, she had when I first came here, a lot of 20-year-olds. I mean, imagine 25, 20-year-olds. We were a handful, okay? And I mean, you can be 50 years old or 80 years old and be a handful too, but we were particularly a handful. She used to say to us, she said, when you're young, you feel like you're Superwoman or Superman. Okay? With youth, strength, and energy, we can mistakenly think that we are invincible. I mean, I can say this is true for myself. I know there are some people who, unfortunately, from a young age have to face illness. And so maybe, they get a real check on that at an early age. But, I think there were a lot of us running around thinking we were invincible. And quite frankly, some of the time we came up with kind of goofy ideas, and she just let us do them. If they weren't harmful things. And then we could see for ourselves whether it worked or not. And then they make it clear that there's nothing wrong with youth. I like my youth. I mean, I spent most of my youth I spent all of my youth in my 20s, from age 23 on in the monastery. It was great, I made a lot of mistakes. I thought I was invincible. Anyway, youth is no problem with youth. We just don't want to get swept away by that which does not last. I think when there's a mix of ages living and practicing together, it's a very harmonious mix. Okay? We all contribute something. And it's just a nice mix. Where Master Jiyu had this kind of mind. Till the day she died, she had a young mind. So she didn't see young people as an impediment and old people as a problem, and middle people as the best thing. She liked people, and she liked young people, and she liked people, okay? And that kind of young mind, I think one can keep no matter how old one gets. I mean, obviously, both the body and the mind age, as we get older. At least what I see in my daily life is I can't remember words anymore. I've always been terrible with names, but now it's just words in general. I just can't find them sometimes. Okay. So this mix of ages is very nice. And in fact, it's the way the Buddha set up monasteries to be. He set them up so monks and lay practitioners would come, children would come, people of all ages would come and practice together. Yeah, in many ways, I think that the move away from the extended family in our culture is unfortunate. Maybe it was inevitable. I don't know. Well, maybe in some ways we go back to it because, my generation, has, if they're lucky, have parents who live to be old and help to take care of them. But there's something about people of all ages living together. It doesn't mean they do everything all day together, but they live together. They help each other. They benefit from each other. I think they've found that if you have, in some of these intentional communities that are being set up now, that there's a mixture of old people and people with kids. They see that as a good mixture. It helps everybody. Okay. And, we have this feeling of independence that we grow into as we grow out of childhood. But quite frankly, I think that feeling of independence often masks the reality that in fact we're dependent. We're always dependent. We're not by ourselves solo. We can grow our own food, but we probably had to purchase various things that we use to grow it with, tools and manure or whatever, from somewhere, from somebody else, okay? And so I think that independence can be a real illusion. Not responsibility, not individual responsibility, but independence. Okay? And if you're kind of only hang out with your age group, I think then the young might not have the opportunity to learn from the experience and wisdom of those older. I think the older can become crabby and focused on their aches and pains. We kind of have this joke at the Abbey about starting a sentence as we get older, as we get older, as we get older. It gets kind of old, We're just getting older. That's all it is. No big deal, okay? And those in the middle group, I don't want to forget the middle group, can avoid those on either side. They're just hanging around with the middle group. I don't want to be with the old fogies. I don't really want to be with the kids either. I'm sure this is a really inaccurate portrayal of the interaction or lack of interaction between different age groups. But it is important to look at avoidance. This is partly what these 5 contemplations are addressing, is our tendency to avoid that which we don't want to see, that which we don't like, that which we find difficult. So the second part of these contemplations, where the Buddha is talking about how we're not the only ones in this condition. We're not the only ones aging. We're not the only ones who get ill. We're not the only ones who will die. We're not the only ones who are going to be parted from the things that we consider precious. And we're not the only ones who are the owners of our karma. We're all the owners of our karma. We're all the owners of all those things. I think that see where I am here. I think that we are not all that different. Wherever we are in that age range, we're not all that different. We're human beings. We're born. We experience life. Definitely, we're not dramatically different, okay? Or diametrically opposed. Yes, we come in all different kinds of sizes and shapes and sexes and whatevers, but there's something basic to the human condition. And I think that this sense of difference, if we're not careful, becomes a fabrication for us of a desperate self trying to be a big somebody. There's a real insightful book, if you get the chance to read it, by Ajahn Sumedho. He was one of the first Western disciples of Ajahn Chah, and it's entitled, "Don't Take Your Life Too Personally." Because isn't that the problem? We take our lives very personally. And again, in many ways, we take our individuality too seriously. We cling to an I, a me, and a mine. Okay? And the fact of the matter is, we're all pretty similar. We all desire peace, security, happiness. We all like to be well-fed, well-treated, well-respected. So I think it's good to contemplate the fact that we all share in a common experience. It was when the Buddha, who had been sheltered from much of life as a very young man, saw the four divine messengers, someone aging, someone sick, someone dead, and a seeker who was attempting to find answers about why life was this way. It's when he saw these four divine messengers that he was jolted. And it made him really think about what he was going to do with his life. And fortunately for us, he went out and sought answers to these questions. So whether or not we acknowledge and accept impermanence, as time ticks away in our life, impermanence is happening, and this impermanence is the common experience of everything around us. It's much better to acknowledge and accept impermanence. I think as I already read, but I'll read again, as the Buddha said at the end of the simile of the mountain, "Therefore a person of wisdom here, out of regard for their own good, steadfast, should settle faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. When one conducts oneself by Dharma, with body, speech, and mind, they praise one here in the present life, and after death one rejoices." So this is the best way to live with impermanence. To take the three refuges, to take the practice into ourselves and let it shine out in our lives. And it's the only path that I know that leads to release. A release from suffering, and this leads to nirvana. And this nirvana, we don't have to wait for death for. We can have it, we can practice it, we can't grab it, and so maybe have it isn't a good word, but we can experience it in our life right now. Homage to all the Buddhas. Homage to all the bodhisattvas in all worlds. Homage to the scripture of great wisdom.